What Collins didn't realize was that Sarah had faced this type of dismissal before. She remembered the countless times she had to prove herself twice as hard to earn the respect freely given to others. But today wasn't about her pride. It was about the team and the patients they served. She listened intently, letting him dig his own hole with every arrogant comment. Meanwhile, one of Sarah's colleagues, Dr. Patel, tried to interject. Actually, Sarah was instrumental in. But Collins cut him off mid-sentence. "I'm sure she does her part," he said with a dismissive wave. The tension in the room was palpable, and all eyes turned to Sarah. Would she let this go, or was it finally time to show Collins exactly who he was dealing with? As the meeting continued, Dr. Collins grew bolder, openly critiquing ideas and processes without realizing many of them came directly from Sarah. The team exchanged uneasy glances, aware that the room was on the verge of an explosion. Sarah, however, remained unshaken. She let him speak, her silence creating an even greater tension. Finally, Dr. Collins proposed a change in the department's workflow, confident in his approach. "This will streamline everything," he declared, standing at the front of the room. He then looked directly at Sarah, smirking. "What do you think? You've been here a while. You probably know the basics." The air seemed to freeze. Sarah stood, her calm demeanor unbroken. Slowly, she began speaking, addressing the room rather than Dr. Collins. "These recommendations," she said, gesturing to the notes on the table, "were actually developed during my tenure as medical director, and they've already saved countless lives." A stunned silence followed. Collins' face hardened, but his unease was clear. The room braced for what Sarah would say next, as everyone realized this wasn't just a routine meeting anymore. It was a defining moment. The administrator's praise hung in the air, but Dr. Collins was not about to back down. His ego wouldn't allow it. His face flushed, and he quickly regained his posture, clearing his throat. "I see you've got a fan club, Sarah," he said with a forced laugh. But there was no mistaking the tension in his voice now. The room was thick with an uneasy energy, and all eyes were on the two of them. Sarah didn't flinch. Instead, she turned her attention back to the administrator, who now seemed to sense the brewing conflict. "I'm just doing my part," Sarah replied with a calm that belied the weight of the situation. "But I'll be happy to go over any updates you need from me." That's when the second twist hit. Just as Dr. Collins opened his mouth to retort, the door to the conference room swung open again. A nurse rushed in, holding a folder. "Sorry to interrupt," she said, her voice shaky. "There's been a critical issue in the ER. We need immediate help." The sudden urgency shocked everyone into silence. Dr. Collins's face turned pale, and the administrator exchanged a glance with Sarah. It was clear now that Sarah's calm, poised leadership was needed, whether Collins was ready for it or not. With her reputation and the hospital's well-being on the line, Sarah had to decide whether to let the conflict simmer or take control of the situation, ensuring that her actions would speak louder than words. The room was on edge, awaiting the next move. The room fell silent as the nurse handed Sarah the folder, her eyes wide with concern. Sarah didn't hesitate. She quickly scanned the document, assessing the situation in an instant. The ER was overwhelmed, and immediate action was needed. Without a word to Dr. Collins, she stood in motion for the nurse to lead the way. The team followed Sarah's lead as she took control of the crisis. Her calmness in the face of chaos, a sharp contrast to Dr. Collins's stunned hesitation. As they made their way to the ER, Sarah was fully in charge, coordinating the team with precision. Dr. Collins, still visibly rattled, struggled to keep up. But it was clear to everyone who was driving the ship now. The tension from the meeting evaporated as Sarah's leadership took center stage, her actions confirming everything Dr. Collins had overlooked. Just as they entered the ER, another unexpected twist came. Sarah's phone buzzed. She checked it quickly, a message from the administrator. The board has just approved your promotion to Chief Medical Officer. Dr. Collins, still fumbling with his thoughts, overheard the news. His face turned crimson as the realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Sarah had been the real leader all along, and he had only made a fool of himself. With the crisis under control, Sarah looked over at him, her expression unreadable. "Dr. Collins," she said coolly, "I suggest you take a moment and rethink how you approach your colleagues. It's not about titles, it's about what you do when it matters most." The room stood still, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Sarah's quiet strength had spoken volumes, and in that moment, the balance of power had shifted. The tension was gone, but the lesson lingered. The audience was left in stunned silence, realizing that the real power in the room wasn't in titles or arrogance. It was in integrity and leadership when it truly counted. As the dust settled, Sarah's colleagues exchanged appreciative looks, recognizing the true leader in the room. Dr. Collins, now humbled, lingered at the back of the ER, his earlier bravado replaced by an uncomfortable silence. Sarah, on the other hand, remained focused on the task at hand, ensuring the ER team had what they needed to handle the crisis. By the end of the day, the team had successfully managed the situation, thanks to Sarah's unwavering leadership. Dr. Collins, though still struggling to accept his mistake, quietly began to follow her lead, understanding that respect couldn't be demanded, it had to be earned. Sarah's promotion to Chief Medical Officer was announced the next week, a well-deserved recognition of her years of hard work and dedication. The hospital, its staff, and even Dr. Collins had learned a valuable lesson. True leadership isn't about authority. It's about empathy, integrity, and knowing how to act when it counts. Imagine stepping into work, ready to make a difference, only to be judged and dismissed before you've even said a word. That's exactly what happened to Sarah, an experienced and highly accomplished Black nurse who also happens to be a medical director. During a routine meeting, a new doctor arrived, exuding confidence but carrying a glaring bias. Instead of recognizing her authority, he undermined Sarah in front of their colleagues, making snide remarks and questioning her qualifications. His words stung, but Sarah stayed calm, letting the moment unfold. Little did he know, the truth about who she was, and her powerful response, was about to leave everyone speechless. What could have been a moment of division became a lesson no one in that room would forget. Stay tuned to see how Sarah turned the tables with grace and dignity, leaving the doctor to confront his own prejudice. Sarah had spent years building her career, breaking barriers in a field that didn't always welcome someone who looked like her. She wasn't just a nurse, she was a leader, a mentor, and a fierce advocate for her patients and her team. But none of that mattered to Dr. Collins, the new physician in the department. From the moment he walked in, his tone made it clear he had already sized her up. He glanced at her name tag and barely masked his surprise. "Oh, you're just a nurse," he scoffed, loud enough for everyone to hear. The room went uncomfortably quiet, but Sarah didn't flinch. What Dr. Collins didn't know was that Sarah had been instrumental in developing the very protocols he was about to follow. As the tension thickened, Sarah's colleagues exchanged glances, unsure of how this was going to play out. But Sarah remained composed, holding back a response for now. Dr. Collins continued speaking, his words laced with condescension as he outlined his approach to patient care. He barely acknowledged Sarah, focusing instead on impressing the other doctors in the room. Some of them nodded along, while others shifted uncomfortably in their seats, glancing at Sarah for her reaction. She remained calm, her hands folded neatly on the table, waiting.